Good morning, everyone. This is John Heerdink. If hopefully some of you are starting to recognize me, I'm the managing member of Tribe Public out of San Francisco. As many of you know, I'm also a managing director and a partner for Vista Partners, which is my registered investment advisor based in California as well. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to some gentlemen from a company called GOVX Labs out of Atlanta, Georgia. They trade on the NASDAQ, symbol GOVX. And I entered this investing into GeoVax when I discovered them last fall after a financing. And so know that I've invested in the company and started building the position last fall. And I'm excited about where they might be going here and their breadth in the portfolio in this world of infectious disease and vaccines. And I'm looking forward to getting you guys much more versed on it today and look forward to hearing your questions. Remember, I've received some of your questions, thank you, via email. But during this, please send it through the Zoom chat feature to me, and I'll try to get those questions answered as well. In the tie, you have the CEO, Chairman, President of GeoVax, David A. Dodd. And in the blue shirt, you have Mark Reynolds, who is the CFO of GeoVax. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to ask David to say a few words about how he came to be at GeoVax and some of his exciting background and a mutual affiliation we had at Bristol Myers Squibb, where I worked early in another life, as I say. And David, we crossed paths in a sense, didn't really know it till recently in Evansville, Indiana, where I'm originally from. So welcome all. Thanks so much. And David, would you say a few words for us?
Sure, John, and thank you. And thank you to everyone who was tuned into this webinar for your potential interest in GeoVax. We're delighted to have this opportunity to introduce our company and hopefully share the excitement that we feel for this and the advancing in progress and building of value. So we look forward to that. As John mentioned, I come from the life sciences industry. I spent my entire career in pharmaceuticals and in related areas in life sciences. Started my career with the traditional sort of big pharma types of companies. And indeed, when it was just Bristol Myers and based in Evansville, Indiana, I went into general management during that time period into running a small division that was women's health care. Stayed there through the Bristol Myers Squibb formation. Worked at Wyeth, ended up running all of Wyeth's U.S. pharmaceuticals through the integration of Ledley. It was a multi-billion-dollar business then, all therapeutic areas. From there, I became a CEO of Solvay Pharmaceuticals, which was a subsidiary, 100% owned in the U.S. of a Belgian corporation. Had the pleasure of leading a significant growth during that time period of revenues from 100 million to 550 million in 5 years, and enterprise value went from 100 million to 2.5 billion. Probably the biggest thing we did during that time was we acquired a company to gain an asset, which we completed and filed, and then ended up subsequently launching, called Androgel, which became a $2 billion plus annual revenue generator for that. That was successful. I also I went into the NASDAQ to run a NASDAQ company called Serologicals Corporation. That was a company that had lost 90% of its value at the time leading up to when I joined it. It was on fumes, literally. It was being investigated by the SEC, had lawsuits, all the usual fun stuff. And in 6 years, we took it from a valuation of 80 million to a $1.5 billion all-cash sell to Millipore Corporation. And following that, I went into private equity for a number of years, started my own investments and did that, and became involved with a company called GeoVax over the course of the time as an investor and a board member. It was a vaccine company spin out of Emory University. At the time, it was solely focused on HIV prevention. Became involved with it, joined the board, became chairman of the board, and played a key role about 7 years ago in moving the strategy beyond HIV to broaden it, not to desert HIV, but to broaden it into other infectious diseases and even into cancer immunotherapies, which we now are conducting and we'll talk about in this presentation. We did at the end of September, we uplisted to NASDAQ. We had a very successful financing of 12.8 million at that point in time, but then in February of this year, following some posting of some exciting news and attention that we received, we added another 10.3 million. So today we are very well capitalized. We have no debt. We have a runway that will take us through 2023. And our focus is completing the animal testing and making a decision of which candidate to take into the clinic behind our COVID-19 vaccine program. We have 4 candidates that are being tested as we speak. And then also we are in cancer immunotherapy, and we plan to move forward and move into the clinic sooner rather than later in that area also. We have other areas we'll talk about, but that is our focus. Our runway gives us all, and the resources we have will enable us to move into the clinic within 12 to 15 months with our products, and maybe even sooner on some things we're working on right now. So very excited about it. My role is as a general manager. We have an outstanding team of virologists and scientists who can construct vaccines based on a unique broad-based technology we'll talk about. And so with that, I suggest, John, unless you'd like me to have Mark introduce himself, and then we'll move forward into the presentation.
Yeah, Mark, please say a couple words, and then let's go into the PowerPoint as you suggested.
Yeah, just real briefly, I've been involved with the company since right after it went public way back in 2006. My background is, I'm a CPA. My background is with Arthur Andersen and several other biotech companies. And I'm really excited, always have been excited about being involved with this company, especially now. This is a very exciting time for us going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And yeah, David, please go ahead and pull up your PowerPoint. We'll get started.
All right. So again, thank you. And I'll mention our forward-looking statement. Just be sure and note that and do your own due diligence if I get you so excited you want to invest later today. So GeoVax is a clinical stage company. We're developing vaccines and immunotherapies against a wide range of infectious diseases and cancers using a proprietary platform. We'll talk about that, but I want to underscore we are well capitalized to advance our priority programs into clinical development within the next 12 to 15 months. These are exciting times for us. We told you about ourselves. We have an outstanding scientific advisory board, some of the biggest names in the field of not only vaccine development, but also in cancer areas such as Dr. Olya Finn. We have an advancing development pipeline. They all are focused on some major areas of medical needs, significant commercial opportunities. I want to, as you'll hear going through this presentation, I'll underscore that our primary focus and our resource allocation and attention on a daily basis is behind our COVID-19 program and our immuno-oncology. You'll learn that our other programs, which are all advancing close to moving into clinical development, we believe those are all pretty much being run on autopilot through non-dilutive financing and management on our behalf of various elements of the federal government. We'll talk about those. As I mentioned, if you look at the opportunities that in which we're focused, you'll see that they all are some areas of major medical needs, significant commercial opportunity. And I'll also point out that 6 of the indications in which we are working all qualify for the FDA's priority review voucher program. So we pay a lot of attention to that, but these also are areas that, again, do not distract and garner much of our attention, but they're all very important areas, and we're in discussions with various parties right now about either partnering to accelerate the advancement of those, or for those to become part of the federal government's bioterrorism stockpile program. And I'll highlight that as we get to those. What is key to our approach is our platform, and it'll be a mouthful, but it's called Modified Vaccinia Ankara, or MVA, and we utilize what are known as virus-like particles. They create non-infectious VLPs, or virus-like particles, in a vaccinated individual. Let me just take a moment to explain MVA. MVA was developed in the 1960s as a specific vaccine against smallpox for people who had compromised immune systems. They had comorbidities. They basically carried risk that they were unable to receive what was then the smallpox vaccine. It is exquisitely safe because of that. It's been tested in over 150,000 individuals worldwide, and there are approved products that are based on MVA on the market today. So it is exquisitely safe in terms of vector or a carrier for a vaccine. Following the development of MVA as a smallpox vaccine at the US NIH, Dr. Bernie Moss and his team, they repurposed MVA and developed it to be a carrier for other vaccines. And that's why there are companies today such as GOVX or Bavarian Nordic and Transgene, all of which use MVA as the platform because of the unique features that it provides. And we'll talk about that coming up. But it's not only safe, it also provides potential single dose protection. And in this presentation, we'll illustrate that through work we've done all the way through non-human primates with highly impressive results. Because of the nature of incorporating the virus-like particles as we do, the vaccine becomes self-adjuvanting, meaning that you do not need to add, typically one does not need to add additional components to our vaccines to achieve the degree of immune response that one is seeking, because it generates it within the individual. And that's very important. Perhaps one of the most important benefits of working with MVA is that it is highly well regarded by regulatory authorities on a worldwide basis. And we'll talk about that. And it's accepted. And you'll see that we've been given certain exemptions for our development programs because it is such a well-recognized, accepted platform. This slide here illustrates the difference between using our platform and taking an approach such as mRNA or the adenovirus that you hear about of Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca, or as I mentioned, the Moderna approach or the BioNTech and Pfizer approach. And that is that those other approaches all restrict a vaccine developer to having to decide which protein out of that targeted pathogen. So if it's COVID-19, which protein are you going to use as the basis for your vaccine? And we'll see that most people will focus on COVID-19 with the spike or the S protein. The value of MVA is that one is able to take multiple, and I mean numerous, one could take 20 different protein components out of the DNA structure and insert that into the MVA. That's what this cartoon, which is illustrating an example of taking 3 segments. So not only would one take an S protein, and you'll see in a minute that we have multiple constructs that we are testing now because we're going for much broader coverage from an immune response. The value of that is that the virus-like particles actually are generated after a patient is injected or basically provided the MVA that's been encoded with our targeted antigens. That creates not only just an antibody response, so you hear a lot about neutralizing antibodies when you hear people talking about COVID-19, but you also get the cellular immunity or the T-cell immune response. The result of having such a broad-based response of both antibody and T-cell ends up not only being the ability to deliver a single dose, but perhaps even more so is the durability. Our HIV vaccine, which has been in humans, we have durability that it continues to stay durable for over 10 years. We've been able to evaluate. We've gone to 12 years of evaluation. So you get a highly durable, which means you don't need to come back for boosters. You eliminate the need for boosters. And it enables you, if you're approaching certain types of viruses or pathogens, to perhaps anticipate what might become a variant and cover it up front rather than chasing after the variants. As an example, with COVID-19, we have 4 vaccines we have designed. They're in animal testing. We expect to see results yet this first half of this year. One of them is uniquely designed to be a single-dose universal coronavirus vaccine. And in that, as we've illustrated in this cartoon, not only do we use the spike protein, but we have encoded other proteins with an anticipation of being able to encompass what variants might end up evolving. And by doing that, we would then be ahead of the curve rather than having to do what the other technologies will do, is they'll do similar to what we do with an annual flu season, is when a new significant or material variant emerges, they'll have to reformulate, do some more testing, and then bring it to market. They'll do it as quickly as they can. So what we're trying to do is to encompass what might be the emerging variants before they occur. Again, I want to illustrate, there's a statement there that says no FDA requirements on toxicology. In May of last year, the FDA provided us in writing an exemption from having to do the standard toxicology testing in the clinical development program of our COVID-19 program because MVA is so well accepted and understood by regulatory authorities. Other areas in which we have been able to demonstrate and illustrate the breadth of our technology is in the hemorrhagic fever viruses. So that means Ebola and cousins of Ebola, such as Lassa, Marburg, and Sudan. Now, to put that in perspective, hemorrhagic fever viruses are highly fatal. We're used to talking about, and we've shut down the entire world when because of COVID-19, and that has around a 1 to 2.5% fatality rate. If you look at the Angola strain of the Marburg virus, you have a 90+% fatality rate. That's why these hemorrhagic fevers are at the top of the list of bioterrorism and why there's a stockpile program within the US federal government today to protect and ward off about that. It is an endemic problem in parts of Africa. It's a threat to our military who might be stationed there, but it's also the #1 area in which unfriendly nations are working to develop bioterrorism threats against the United States and other sort of free societies. Now, so we've already been able to demonstrate 100% single dose protection in preclinical lethal challenges for Ebola, Marburg, and Lassa, as well as Sudan more recently. We've been able to show 100% single dose protection with the Zika virus vaccine, and we're working on malaria, for which, as you may be aware of, that malaria, there's only one vaccine in the world today that exists. It requires 4 doses. It has an efficacy rate of only 30 to 40%. We're currently being funded and have been funded by the US Agency for International Development to apply our technology, and we're working with the Burnet Institute out of Australia, which is one of the leading infectious disease and tropical disease research institutes in the world, and then Leidos, which is a corporation that is a life sciences and aerospace and defense. All of this has been funded primarily through non-dilutive sources, so we've been able to advance that. Just a moment on some data, because people like to see data, it seems like, but as we mentioned in the non-human primate model with Ebola, we demonstrated 100% protection, single dose, no adjuvants, and no boosters. Our Ebola vaccine is the only such Ebola vaccine that has demonstrated that through non-human primates. The product, Merck's product, which is approved approved by FDA, it requires adjuvants and boosters. Same with the Johnson & Johnson product that is advancing. So with Lassa, Sudan, and Marburg, you can see there in other animal models, we've shown 100% protection, single dose in these. So much so with Zika, as we mentioned, not only did we show 100% protection, but to date, ours has been the only being commercially developed Zika virus vaccine that does not carry the risk of what is known as antibody-dependent enhancement of infection against dengue or other similar types of flaviviruses or viruses, meaning that what has happened is that when someone would receive a vaccine or a test vaccine against Zika virus, it actually made them more susceptible to dengue. We don't want that to happen. Ours has demonstrated that it does not even carry that risk. So we're quite excited about that, and it's ready to proceed forward into clinical development. Our near-term data milestones that we have is certainly, as I've mentioned, that in the first half, we'll have the results of our animal testing for COVID-19. We'll make decisions. We'll communicate those publicly of what will be going into the clinic. We're in close communication and contact with the NIH and with BARDA. In February, we announced a receipt of NIH funding, our first tranche of funding from NIH behind our COVID-19 program. They're very much aware of our approach, our technology, and seem to be advocates for it. So we expect to have accelerated support to be able to proceed forward into clinical testing at a much faster pace. The US Army is currently funding our Lassa vaccine all the way through non-human primate testing and the preparation of our cGMP material to move it into the clinic. Those results are also coming forward in the first half of this year. And our Marburg and Sudan vaccines they're being tested now through non-human primates by NIH, again, in a non-dilutive manner, and we anticipate those results also. Our malaria vaccines are at an earlier stage. The purpose of these studies or these tests is to be able to enable us to select which will be our candidate to further optimize and then to move forward in conjunction with the Burnett Institute and move forward into higher order through non-human primate, hopefully in the clinic. But we will have those results, if not yet this quarter, then in the first half of 2021. So it's an exciting first half coming off of not too long ago of being listed on NASDAQ and doing a financing. So we're quite excited about that. I mentioned earlier about the FDA's program for priority review vouchers. Many people are familiar with that program. This is where there's a list of certain sort of rare diseases, neglected diseases. 6 of the indications, Ebola, Lassa, Marburg, Sudan, malaria, and Zika, all are part of that program. If one successfully develops a product and has it approved by the FDA and it fits one of these indications, you can request a voucher. The value of that voucher is twofold. One, it can be applied to a future product for an accelerated 6-month review. Most importantly, perhaps, is these vouchers are sellable, and half of the vouchers that have been granted thus far have been sold for ranging up to over $300 million at an average of about $135 million. It's a terrific source of non-dilutive financing, especially for small companies, because the vouchers are usually sold to the likes of Novartis or Gilead or Merck, and then they use it to apply to behind the review of a future blockbuster. So we pay very much attention to that. And as we mentioned, we have some exciting programs that are advancing, all that qualify for that. In HIV, which we continue, as I mentioned, we've not deserted it. In fact, our GOVX B11 is the most clinically advanced HIV vaccine program for the strain or the subtype of HIV that is prevalent in the developed world. We've had excellent data, both in the antibody profile and durability. The only preventive HIV vaccine that has ever showed any degree of efficacy was a Sanofi trial, which goes by the name of RV144. It was conducted in Thailand several years ago. It only showed an efficacy of 31%, so it was not good enough to take to registration. But when we compare our data to the RV144 Sanofi data, we have twice as good in terms of antibody profile and durability than we saw there. So we're ready to proceed into a pivotal trial, but we're waiting for funding that would come from a non-dilutive nature, because we're focused much more heavily on moving forward our COVID-19 and our immuno-oncology. We are in some upcoming trials. There are 2 functional cure trials that are underway right now, both of which use our vaccine, followed by either, in one case, a gene therapy treatment, or in another case, a combination of an antibody and a peptide. And then the NIH has approved another preventive trial, which will use our current vaccine with a novel booster to see if one is able to even get a stronger response. And again, as the money comes, we will then proceed with that. But this does not distract our primary focus, again, which is behind the COVID-19 and the cancer immunotherapies. So speaking of cancer, I want to take a moment. We came up with a concept several years ago, looking at the fact that although checkpoint inhibitors had come out, they weren't garnering the type of success that a lot of people had hoped for and all of us had hoped for. So our concept was, can we construct a vaccine built around a tumor-associated antigen and then combine that with an immune checkpoint inhibitor and get even better results and more consistent results? So our initial focus is on the MOC1 protein. As this cartoon illustrates, it's highly and widely expressed in numerous cancers. That's one reason why it's a good target. And the second is we're fortunate to work closely with Dr. Otya Finn out of the University of Pittsburgh, who is the first person to describe and characterize the MOC1 protein and its basically role in so many cancers now. And so what we have done is we conducted some experiments. This is an experiment where we took humanized mice against a human tumor, and one cohort received no type of therapy. Others received individual therapy, and one cohort received the combination of our MVA-VLP MOC1 tumor-associated antigen along with the immune checkpoint inhibitor. And in that case, what we see is the red line down below, the black line at the top, the cancer, the tumor continued to grow. If you look at the red line at day 30, it arrested and began to decline. And the difference between those two is right at 60%. And so we believe that this was very encouraging for us. So we decided to stress it even more and test it in a preventive model. Our focus going forward is really on the therapeutic, but we really wanted to stress to see how well this concept might work. So in this case, what we did was we took, again, the humanized mouse model. All the mice were cancer-free, introduced cancer to both groups. One group received no treatment. The other group received our vaccine, but it did not even include a checkpoint inhibitor. It was basically MVA-VLP, MACH1, and peptide. And that group, 100% protection. The group that did not receive our vaccine, 100% development of the cancer. So we're focused on refining that and moving it forward. And we'll be announcing yet this year, later in the year, our plans to move into the clinic in our cancer immuno-oncology program. So in terms of intellectual property, we have 70 granted or pending patent applications spread over 20 patent families. So we pay a lot of attention in terms of protecting what we continue to generate. It's very important. We're fortunate that we licensed the technology out of NIH that came out of Dr. Bernie Moss's lab, and that's the backbone of everything that we do. What we've done and added to it is our novel nature is the incorporation of these in vivo VLPs that give us the durability, that give us the response, a single dose. So we end up with having a technology and a pipeline that has potential for delivering single dose, highly durable, no boosters necessary, and minimal to no refrigeration, with our current focus on the COVID-19 and the immuno-oncology program. And just again, in conclusion, significant opportunities in a number of areas. We anticipate moving forward into the clinic yet over the next year to 15 months, and we look forward to keeping the marketplace updated and answering any questions that you may have. So again, thank you for your time and attention and potential interest in the company. And John, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, David and Mark. I appreciate you pulling up the PowerPoint and sharing your story with today. It's pretty exciting. It's amazing. We're packaged inside of approximately $30 million market cap. One of the first questions was, after these two raises, the one in the fall, the 12 plus million, and then the 10 million recently, how much cash does that put on your balance sheet in total? And in addition to that, are there any partnering sort of opportunities or NIH opportunities that you spoke to that would bolster that balance sheet?
Thank you. Let me address those. So we are funded through 2023 into 2024. Right now at the runway, we have in excess of $20+ million in capital right now. That will enable us to move forward with our two priority areas and with the focus of accelerating entry into the clinical development. So we're well suited there. In the raise that we did at the end of September, there were warrants there at $5. They're good for 5 years. We've been able to see every time our stock price, when we have some news, we'll see exercise of those warrants. So in addition to the two raises we've done, we brought in a little over $2 million because of exercise of warrants. So we'll see that continuing to occur also. Probably at some point following the data milestone announcements, and as we get to the latter part of this year, or maybe into next year, we'll entertain additional opportunities to add capital to further accelerate. And we'll probably implement some other tools that will put in place that will be able to take advantage when the market is supporting us, and we could pull, like an ATM to pull. Also, you put stock out there and bring additional monies in. So we'll continue to do that. In terms of partnering, we are in discussions right now with partnering. For certain markets, we certainly think that we'll have the capability to go to market. We have the experience in-house and expertise of being able to take products to the market successfully, even if we end up working through contracted sales organizations or those types of things. So we feel comfortable there, but we are entertaining, and we're in negotiations right now with various discussions of parties that would like to collaborate with us, or either joint development or in some cases maybe have certain territorial rights as part of a collaboration that they would handle. So we're open to all of those types of avenues. And with the recent recapitalization, the fact that we have such a clean balance sheet and the resources that we have now and what we're advancing on, there does seem to be a significant amount of interest and attention to talking to us about opportunities.
Okay, thank you. And then sort of carrying on with that, you mentioned a voucher opportunity. Can you speak to that again? What financially does that mean? A lot of people are just not familiar with the voucher.
That's right. It's very, so I'll put in perspective, the FDA Priority Review Voucher or PRV program, it was the first one was issued, I believe, in 2009, and they began to sell them, allow to where they could sell those in 2014. So it's relatively recently, not immediate. But to receive and qualify for a voucher, it's not like orphan drug status where someone says, oh, I have orphan drug status, but they may never be successful in developing a product. A PRV or priority review voucher, when one qualifies to be able to request that, is when one has successfully developed and received FDA approval. So if you develop a product or an indication that's covered within the program. So, and there's a list. You can go on the internet and just and you can do a search that says FDA Priority Review Voucher Program, and you see all the areas that qualify. If you successfully develop a product and receive approval from the FDA for one there, then you qualify to request a priority review voucher. So it's not like near-term capital opportunity for us, but let me take an example. Let's say Lassa. So Lassa is successfully developed from us because when we finish what we're doing right now, our next stage will be, and we would anticipate if we're successful, that we'll be funded to move into the clinic by the federal government because the nature of the need and what they're interested in. So upon completion of that, we would then request a priority review voucher. Upon receipt of that voucher, we can either hold on to it and utilize it for a future product that we want to have an accelerated 6-month review versus 10 to 12 months, or, which has happened with most small companies, larger companies who are developing blockbuster base, another Keytruda or something such as that, they will have an interest in getting a 6-month review because they anticipate selling $10 billion a year. And if they can get out 6 months earlier, that's a potential value of $5 billion for them. So at that stage, we would look to maximize the value of that voucher for us, which would be to sell it for as much as possible. And as I mentioned, the range has exceeded $300 million of these vouchers, but the average value of the 18 that have been sold thus far has been 135 million.
Got it. Thank you. Switching gears here, but speaking to COVID-19, says, can you review again when we can expect preclinical results for your COVID-19 vaccine? And when do you expect to begin phase 1 of the clinical trial?
Yeah, the animal testing is expected, initial animal testing is expected in the first half of this year. Mm-hmm. And then we would expect that going from there, because as soon as that comes forward, our next step will then, assuming that the data look good, which we expect that the data will look good, obviously, then we'll sit down with NIH and BARDA, and depending on what comes out of that, if it's accelerated financing, then we'll go much faster into the clinic. If we're working in conjunction with them, we still have the resources to be able to move into the clinic rather rapidly. But the nice thing about the sponsorship and support from NIH and or BARDA is that we can then have a full plan all the way through a phase 2 into phase 3 if necessary. And that would then be occurring in the early part of next year.
Okay. One of the questions that came early, it says that with a handful of the COVID vaccines now out, can you differentiate what yours will bring to the table versus the offering that we're looking at today?
It's an excellent question. I try to touch on it, but it's one that's asked all the time. You know, why do you need another product? And there are a couple of points. If you recall, our approach, our MVA-VLP approach enables us to encode these multiple components of proteins into our vaccine. The other technologies can only handle one at a time. So if you're looking at, for instance, the Moderna, they're using the S protein, that's the predominant protein. And as we see these variants emerge, if one of them is, let's say, the South African or the UK, one will very likely have to go back and determine what is the protein component that triggers that particular variant. And they'll have to then sort of reformulate, just as you do an annual flu vaccine, and then go forward with that. Our approach is different, is that we are encoding a breadth of different proteins so that we believe that we can cover the spectrum, so that our vaccine would be a broad-based, sort of more what we call universal coronavirus, that would cover not just the S protein, but the emerging variants also. That's one major point of differentiation, because instead of chasing the virus or the emerging variants, we will actually be encompassing it in our initial design. So that's an important point. The other point is that there are certain populations who are going to be more at risk, as we mentioned, just as there was in the original smallpox vaccine. So when one looks at people with underlying medical conditions, comorbidities, the elderly, and those things, you need an exquisitely safe and yet highly effective one. And ours is the ideal type of technology to go forward with that, because that's what we've been able to demonstrate before. And a critical point is, although the J&J vaccine has demonstrated single dose, it does have 66% efficacy rate. Our technology is noted because of the MVA incorporation that we do for providing single dose protection and not requiring any boosters, and having strong durability, meaning not having to come back every 2 years or more or something such as that. And so we think that gives us the points of differentiation. If one is monitoring all the recent comments about what is emerging, it fits in exactly to what our entire approach has been. In fact, on November the 7th of last year, the NIH issued a new call for proposals. And even though that was right at the time that the Pfizer BioNTech product was announced, that it was efficacious, 94, 95%. But what the NIH is really looking for is technologies that can cover broader immune response than just a single protein, can be single dose, and can also be delivered in a minimal to no refrigeration. Those are the attributes of our technology. So we think there is plenty of room that we'll be able to come in and garner significant market position and utilization of a product based on our MVA-VLP approach.
Okay, thank you, David. Next question is around your patents on the MVA. Can you, and specifically versus Bavarian Nordic, are there any issues? What are your issues in total, if any?
No, Bavarian Nordic's patents are for certain insertions, certain specific insertion sites on the MVA virus. Our patents that we have licensed are all other sites. So we utilize all of the patents that come out of the NIH, out of Bernie Moss's lab. So that's what we utilize on ours. And then we patent every product. We've just recently filed another patent. So we'll be talking about that in the very near term soon. But we've been making announcements during fourth quarter about the licenses we executed with NIH, not only related to COVID-19, but also to cover our entire breadth of all of our developments, oncology and everything.
Okay, thank you. I guess taking a step back, can you speak to the terms of your licensing agreement with Emory or other state?
With Emory, that's only related to HIV. And so it's very specific to HIV, and it is a standard license. It's for the earliest license agreement. It'll expire in a few years. So then the royalty rates and stuff will go down even more. But again, with HIV, we're not driving the HIV, because we have not seen a strong sentiment for support and financing of HIV preventive vaccines with all the retroviral drugs that are out there today. And so our program advances as it receives non-dilutive financing. So we have a historical agreement with Emory. We maintain it, but as those patents that are the basis for the licenses that we have with Emory on our HIV, as they expire, then the terms become even less and less in terms of royalty and requirements.
Gotcha. Okay. Playing off of that, with specifically in HIV, Ebola, and Zika, You've been at this for some manner of time, and maybe you could clarify exactly how long you've been pushing these programs along as a company. One of the questions is, why, with that span of time, why have you not completed clinical trials at this point? And I think you sort of spoke to a little bit of that with regards to HIV, but could you elaborate?
Sure. Yeah, the company was founded 20 years ago out of Emory University, and it was solely focused on HIV and was solely financed through NIH funding. And we, over a period of years, we went through a phase 2A program, highly impressive, successful results. We've been waiting for almost 9 years now for financing from NIH to move into a pivotal trial in the clinic. So we've completed a phase 2A. Our phase 2B program was costed out under the NIH protocol at about $50 to $75 million. And frankly, as a very small company, and at the time a bulletin board company, we certainly did not have the resources to be able to finance and move forward with that. And also the NIH was wanting to partner in a manner that we would pay for at least half of that. So again, we didn't have the resources, but that was the motivation. So in a sense, we made lemonade out of those lemons. So we were frustrated. So in 2014, so 7 years ago, this year, it's not quite, it was about 6.5 years ago now, we decided that we had to look at something else, and we decided to validate the degree to which our approach, our MVA-VLP, would be applicable to other infectious diseases, and were there other areas, which eventually led us into the cancer immunotherapy. So starting with Ebola, we went and we embarked on that program, and we were funded all the way through non-human primates. And as I mentioned, we're the only company that has shown 100% single dose protection, no adjuvants and no boosters through the non-human primate model with Ebola. We've been waiting for about 5 years to we're ready to go into the clinic, but we literally have not had the capital resources to move that forward. And with Merck in an active clinical program with their resources and J&J, we simply didn't have the financing. So then we decided to further validate it. And that's what we've done in the Zika virus. We've been ready for about 2 years to move to the clinic there, but it was only in this last, in the financings that we did in September, only since then have we had the capital to be able to make decisions to move into the clinic. And that's why we're in the discussions we're in now. We now have the resources to actually drive into the clinic on our own or in partnership, and that's what we're focused on doing. So in the interim, what we've done is we've been able to validate and illustrate the value of our approach against all the hemorrhagic fever vaccines. We now have the support behind us of the federal government in the hemorrhagic fever vaccine, so that we have a rather high degree of confidence that upon successful results of Lassa, Marburg, and Sudan, along with our Ebola, we believe we will be funded and supported to go into clinical development and into approval and to become part of the federal government stockpile program in the end with those. Zika virus, we had, again, very impressive results. We didn't have the resources to move it into the clinic, and we were in discussions to move into the clinic with a partner 2 years ago, but frankly, we didn't have the resources to contribute our portion of that. But today we do, and we've re-engaged those discussions also. So with cancer, with our cancer immunotherapies, we're at the point now where we are in discussions and moving forward. So it's very good times. When we did the recapitalization, the financing last September, and the raise on NASDAQ, or listing on NASDAQ, and we've moved forward more recently, it puts us into a whole new realm of being able to move stuff into the clinical development.
Fantastic, thank you. Specifically regarding Ebola, there's been a number of reports, breakouts in Africa. The question is to what degree, if any, have you been looped into the conversation by any authorities or by anyone to date?
We're in discussions on our Ebola vaccine. Again, we need to move it into the clinic. We could do that very quickly. And with the portfolio we have, because it's not just Ebola, the Ebola outbreak just reinforces that for all 4 of these hemorrhagic fever viruses, we need to have vaccines out there. And we have the technology, probably the only technology being an MVA-VLP, where we have the potential of designing a vaccine that would be for more than one of the hemorrhagic fevers all in one vaccine, by the way we could encode the different proteins.
Okay. Let's see, I think we got one or two last. There seems to be a number of questions around, I guess, the stock showing up on the charts around $30+ Can you speak to that? I'm sure that's in reflection of the reverses that you've had to go to. Maybe this is
historically. So as Mark alluded to, in 2006, the company did a reverse merger, and none of us were around then, which means that we obviously think it wasn't the best move. And during that time period, it also ended up having an investor that pretty much had a stranglehold on the company. And so going through those period, we ended up doing three, Mark, a reverse split.
Yeah, let me expand on that a little bit. The reverse splits we've done in the past were all centered around recapitalizing to meet the needs of our obligations under these the toxic financings that were done in the past, all related to convertible preferred stock. During 2020, we completely exited out of those structures. We did one final reverse split that was in September. That was a 1-for-20 that allowed us to get onto NASDAQ. And so, anything looking at prior numbers, you got to take that into take those numbers with a grain of salt, because they're reflective of a number of reverse splits. So, from September of 2020 forward, it's a brand new company. That's kind of the way to look at it.
Yeah, our goal was to clean up the capital structure, get rid of all toxicity, finance the company, have no debt, and be able to uplist to NASDAQ, and then go forward, moving the programs forward that we knew could really resonate and move into the clinic. And that's what we've been able to execute on over these last 6 months. Okay.
And so after this latest financing, your issued and outstanding is sitting at around 6 million shares. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes, 6.1 approximately.
6.1, and puts us in the $30 million market cap range at a $5 or so that we're trading at now. The couple questions around shareholder ownership. Is the board or management, what's the insider ownership at this point?
Inside ownership stands at about 7% right now. And, I always expand on that. A lot of times that sounds like a low number. But when the number is any higher, usually you've got a management that's built up ownership over a period of time, or you've got founders' shares. So the things I'll mention here are that it's all second generation management. So there's nobody here that's got founder shares. And as part of the recapitalization, the cleanup that we've done over the past couple of years, the management team was wiped out. So, we started going into the financing with basically no shares, because they were all gone. I mean, we had each purchased shares, and they were gone. So, but during that course of time, while we were cleaning up over a multi-year period, we all had deferred salaries. We were taking very low salaries. David was practically taking nothing. So at the time of the September offering, we all ponied up $1.5 million of our salary deferrals, and took that at the same deal that the public shareholders got. So that's where the 7% derives from.
Okay, thank you. And is on the sell side, I believe you have one analyst that from a bank that is covering you. Who is that, and what's their current position? They have a buy, the price target? What are they saying?
David, do you want to handle
yeah,
that?
Jason McCarthy at Maxim initiated coverage. I believe it was in November of last year, and it's a buy. And I think the target, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, is $8 a share.
It was $8, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I suspect that you're probably being courted by other banks and analysts out there, and that's going to probably fill out from here. I guess let's go ahead and wrap this up. We've exceeded our time. I appreciate all the tribe members that have come on today, and thank you for your questions. If we didn't get them all answered, we'll do our best to get those answered going forward. Please note that I'll be publishing the video of this at the Tribe Public YouTube channel sometime around this week, maybe later today, if I can get moving fast enough. And so you can review that, and if there's anything that you missed or want to reflect back at the PowerPoint, et cetera. Thanks again for taking the time, and look forward to having you participate in the future and get the companies that you care about, like we have with GeoVax that many of you expressed interest. Thank you for being a part of this and expressing via the wish list at tripublic.com, and continue to do so as we look forward to learn from leaders such as David and Mark and GeoVax. I would leave it to you, David, with any ending comments.
Well, first off, thank you, John. We really appreciate the opportunity to have been part of this webinar. And we especially thank all of those who joined the webinar, who've shown an interest and asked some very good questions. Thank you.
Thanks again, gentlemen. Thank you all. Have a good day.